Hello, and welcome to Life Diaries, a space where the pages of life open up, one story at a time. These are tales written by experience, spoken from the heart. Take a moment for yourself, and let's begin. The melody of a smartphone, ringing closer to noon on a perfectly ordinary working Thursday, once again divided Sandy's life into a happy period before and an almost hopeless one after. The screen displayed a familiar word: Mom. Although calls in the middle of the day were not a very frequent occurrence, the woman felt no bad premonitions about it. What if? Maybe Mom missed her or wanted advice on choosing clothes. Sandy put a pencil point on the margin of the customer contract draft and hurried to answer the call. She didn't want to worry her loved one with a long wait. As soon as the woman heard her mother's voice, which sounded unusually muffled, as it seemed to her heart plummeted somewhere down. It was obvious that something not joyful at all had happened. The assumption, unfortunately, was confirmed. Alex, hello. Please don't worry too much. It just so happened that I'm in the hospital right now. Sandy became agitated. Mom, what happened? Which hospital are you in? What are the doctors saying? What do you need me to bring? What's the room number? The voice from the receiver interrupted the stream of questions. Alex, I beg you, don't worry. It all happened like in a movie. I slipped, fell, almost lost consciousness. But everything's okay. The neighbor, Linda, was passing by. She cheered me up and supported me while we waited for the ambulance. The doctor said everything will be fine, but I'll have to stay in the hospital for a little while. Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner? I would have rushed over, helped. I didn't want to bother you in the middle of your workday, but visiting hours are in the evening, from 4 to 7, and if you went home from the office first, then to the pharmacy, I was afraid you might not make it. Anyway, please write down what you need to bring here. The main things are my insurance policy and a phone charger. Water too, non-carbonated, because for some reason I'm very thirsty. Invisible to Sandy, Mom sighed. The woman vividly imagined how her loved one's face was contorted with pain, shock, and hurried to end the conversation, clarifying the hospital and room number. Sandy reread the list of everything her mother had dictated, adding chicken broth and wet wipes. Then, on shaky legs, she went to ask her boss for leave. Edward Arthur, may I please leave early today? I need to for personal reasons. Mom ended up in the hospital. The boss, a friend of Sandy's husband from their student years, expressed polite words of sympathy. Learning which hospital his subordinate's mother was in, he encouraged her and asked, "The doctors at our regional hospital are good. Maybe the setting isn't too luxurious, but both the equipment and the staff are top-notch. I've been in that hospital several times, discharged like new. So everything will be fine, don't get down. By the way, are you driving today or is Jake using the car? Maybe Bill can give you a ride." Sandy was touched by her boss's concern. She decided she wasn't in a position to refuse the offer. Thank you, Edward Arthur. That would be very helpful. I won't keep the driver long. I just need to stop by Mom's house and that's it. I won't keep Bill any longer. I'll gather the necessary things there, and then I'll call a taxi. Thank you. The manager wished Sandy success and promised, "Come out to the central entrance in 15 minutes. I'll tell Bill to wait for you at your mother's house and drop you off at your and Jake's family nest. He has to come back for me anyway, and your house is on the way." Thanking the thoughtful boss again, Sandy went to shut down her computer and tidy up her workspace. She took the contract with her so as not to let the whole team down and to complete the necessary work by the next morning. The woman barely registered the meaning of the stories the driver tried to entertain her with, but she was even grateful that his stream of words forced her to react in some way and prevented her from sinking into anxious thoughts. Following the list, checking off each item, Alex gathered things in her mother's apartment. She watered her favorite flowers, just in case, turned off the gas and water, Sandy checked the refrigerator for anything perishable and gathered the trash to throw away. Only then did she go downstairs and continued on with the talkative Bill. Not far from Sandy and Jake's house was a supermarket with a pharmacy section inside. The woman decided to stop there on the way. Asking Bill to stop near the container area, she threw away the collected trash and rushed in for groceries. Moving almost on autopilot, Alex bought everything she needed. Soon, she was simultaneously preparing dinner for her husband and broth for her mother. While the food was boiling and baking, Sandy called Jake and explained the situation. "Jake, Mom's in the hospital. I'm going to see her. I don't know exactly how long I'll stay. Dinner will be on the stove." The man admitted, "I know. Ed told me you needed support. Wait for me. I'll try to get home earlier and we'll go to the hospital together. You never know what else might be needed. And this way, I'll be on hand." Jake didn't let his wife down. Grabbing her and the 2 bags she had packed, he drove her to the hospital. Sandy managed to persuade the nurse receiving deliveries to let her see her mother and the attending physician, who, fortunately, was there. Jake stayed in the lobby to wait for his wife, but he sent warm words and wishes for a speedy recovery through her. Martha Jane tried to smile when she saw Alex enter the room, but it was clear she was both uncomfortable and scared. The woman quietly but clearly greeted everyone in the room. She walked towards her mother's bed. A weight was suspended from the unfortunate woman's right leg. Her lips, bitten almost to bleeding, clearly indicated that the victim of the ice had been in great pain. Sandy listened to her mother's story of how she got into trouble. Trying not to cry, she began unpacking everything she had brought into the nightstand. The phone was immediately put on charge. Alex gave her mother the cooked broth and made her eat a few spoonfuls of raw, finely grated carrots. They say on the internet that this kind of salad is the best vitamin remedy in the first few days after an injury. Then I'll give you some sour berry juice. That's also good. "Oh, daughter, don't worry. You should probably go. Jake will come home. He'll probably be surprised you're not there." Alex explained that her husband knew what had happened and rushed home so she wouldn't have to take a taxi. She said he wasn't allowed in, but he sent his regards. As if she had only been waiting for this remark, the woman lying on the next bed became active. "The orderlies and nurses here are rude and boorish," she butted in. "You can't get them day or night. They just drink tea and hang around the doctors. Giving them chocolates, even money, is useless. They still do their duties half-heartedly." Sandy remained silent and, having found out her mother's attending physician's name and patronymic, went to look for him. The restless neighbor didn't miss the opportunity to comment here either. "If he's not in the doctor's lounge, check the dressing room. He's probably chatting with someone there." Dryly thanking the grumbler, Alex went out into the corridor. The nurses in the trauma department, accustomed to all sorts of patient relatives, tears, hysterics, looked at the visitor asking how to find the doctor with a mixture of irritation and weariness. But one of them, who held herself like a supervisor, answered thoroughly. "George Stephen is currently in the head doctor's office, down that end of the corridor, the second to last door. You can wait there or sit on the bench near the doctor's lounge." Alex waited for the doctor. When he learned that she was Martha Jane's daughter, he invited her into the office. Showing an X-ray on the computer screen, George Stephen explained, "If I can put it this way, your mother's fracture was a successful one. Generally, there are 2 treatment options." The man began explaining the nuances of each method, then asked, "Which option have you decided on?" Sandy looked the doctor in the eye but didn't answer, instead asking a counter-question. "Tell me, George Stephen, for instance, if a close personal friend of yours had a fracture like my mother's, what would you recommend?" Smiling, the doctor replied briefly, "Osteosynthesis. In a very similar case with my aunt, our head doctor performed a similar operation. She's been leading an active life again for a year now, even working in her garden. So I can't keep up with her." The woman clarified all the details of the upcoming operation. She wrote down what else needed to be brought for the post-operative period and, saying goodbye to the doctor, left the office. Alex had to announce to her mother that the operation was scheduled for the very next day. Composing herself, the woman presented it as lightly as possible, trying not to alarm her loved one. "I'll come tomorrow and meet you after the operation. Everything will be fine, don't worry." "Sandy, dear, what about your work? Your boss will probably be angry?" "Don't you worry about that. I'll get all the work done and won't let you or my boss down." With the operation, the long road for Martha Jane to walk again had only just begun. For 2 weeks, Alex visited her mother almost daily to feed her and take care of her. The woman tried to object and repeatedly stated, "Sandy, dear, take care of yourself. Don't come to me so often. The food here is decent, and I don't have much appetite anyway." Where would it come from if I'm not expending any energy? However, Martha Jane couldn't convince her daughter. When the day of discharge arrived, Sandy went to the doctor for recommendations. George Stephen was cautious and warned, "Your mother is a very energetic lady, but I've stated my point of view, and I'll repeat it to you. I wouldn't be excessively optimistic if I were you. But you don't need to despair either." Although she absolutely cannot put full weight on the injured limb. Crutches are Martha Jane's best friends for at least the next month, and she needs to be careful after that too. Movement is necessary, of course, but cautiously. Preventive treatment is recommended to prevent bed sores. "I'll expect you back in 6 weeks for a follow-up X-ray to check the stage of bone fusion. That seems to be everything." Sandy clarified, "Maybe some vitamins for Mom?" George Stephen shrugged. "In principle, yes. But generally, they should tell you about the rehabilitation plan at the local clinic." Sandy called a specialized taxi service for transporting people with limited mobility. After the heroic struggle through the approach streets, Martha Jane finally found herself in her apartment. A new problem arose for Alex. Her mother's physical condition was still far from ideal. Even a simple trip to the bathroom or kitchen could result in a new injury. For the first while, Sandy visited Martha Jane twice a day, and by the time the New Year holidays approached, she was practically exhausted. Traffic jams took up so much time that only a few miserable hours were left for sleep. Alex turned to her husband. "Jake, why don't we have Mom stay with us for a while? At least I won't have to rush between apartments." The man's face darkened, and after a heavy pause, he replied, "Sandy, I think the world of your mother. Martha Jane is a wonderful woman. But forgive me. I'll be blunt. We simply have no room for her here. As you know, we have a studio apartment. The room is large in terms of square footage, but there's only one. When I tried to persuade you to take out a mortgage, I didn't find understanding, and both you and your mother were against it. Jake, couldn't we just put up a screen? It would be like 2 rooms. Listen, Martha Jane would be the one who's most uncomfortable. I play computer games loudly and I listen to music late at night. Besides, ask her yourself if she'd agree to move. I can tell you with 100% certainty that she'll say no. Your mother is very tactful and wise, and understands that the further away she lives, the better her relationship with her son-in-law will be." Jake was right. Martha Jane, as soon as she heard the idea of moving into her son-in-law and daughter's apartment, simply snorted indignantly. "There can't even be a conversation about it. Home is where the heart is. I won't go to your place, especially since it would be uncomfortable to be sick there quietly." Alex submitted to her mother's will, and besides, she didn't want to argue with her husband at all. She continued to spend time stuck in traffic. She had to vacate her lawyer position at Edward Arthur's firm. With her boss's permission, Sandy transferred to a part-time schedule. She was very happy that the manager was able to accommodate her. She prepared contracts during visits, trained her successor, and diligently performed all duties that didn't require constant presence in the office. However, rehabilitation cost much more money than the woman could have imagined. Sometimes she shared her indignation with her husband about how pharmacies changed prices at will and tried to sell the most expensive option of medication. And then Jake would grumble, "Listen, Sandy, shouldn't your mother be provided with some free medications?" The woman tried not to answer this. After all, the family budget wasn't suffering. She hadn't asked her husband for money in the almost 6 months since the fateful news of her mother's troubles. Alex generally tried to handle the situation herself, without involving Jake. The weather changed, but Sandy's schedule, by established tradition, remained almost unchanged. In the morning, she prepared breakfast for her husband and, if she had time, prepared lunch and dinner beforehand. Then, packing some of the breakfast into a container, she rushed to her mother's, stopping at the store and pharmacies along the way. Care, maintaining morale, and helping with movement around the apartment took up a lot of time. Then Alex would stop by the office and rush home by evening. In case of any emergencies, her mother's apartment key was with her neighbor. The same Linda who had helped her wait for the ambulance. She would sometimes drop by to watch TV together and gossip about something. So Martha Jane couldn't be called abandoned. But Alex desperately wanted to get her mother back on her feet quickly. And not just because she had to spend a huge amount of time on daily, weekend-free, holiday-free travel between very distant parts of the city. It was simply because her mother was the closest person to her. She had, in essence, given Sandy life twice, the first time on her birthday 38 years ago. But the main thing was later, when a terrible tragedy struck Alex like a terrible avalanche. It was her mother who was there during those dark days, helping her move when her legs almost gave out from nervous shock, forcing her to drink and eat with persuasion, or through sheer effort. Giving up her lucrative, not-too-taxing job, her mother sold her apartment in their hometown. She practically moved it like a huge, clumsy bundle 2,000 kilometers away from the place where everything reminded Sandy of her inhuman grief. It was Martha Jane who made her get a job where it was almost impossible to be alone with her sad thoughts, where she had to look stylish and fit. Alex didn't consider helping her mother a sacrifice, and, despite her tiredness, tried to surround her husband with care as well. Especially since their 10th wedding anniversary was approaching. The woman wanted to arrange a touching congratulation and a pleasant surprise for her patient Jake. She had already prepared a preliminary menu draft. She found a confectionery that took custom orders and arranged for a special-shaped cake for her husband, who adored sweets. The holiday was approaching, but shortly before it arrived, Jake warned her during breakfast one morning. "Sorry, Sandy. I need the car for a few days. I need to go to the neighboring region, to the branch. It seems like the branch manager is messing with the reports there. Profit has dropped significantly, although everything is stable in other divisions, and some are even growing. I'll try to be quick, of course, but planes probably don't fly to those parts, and I really don't fancy going by train. Can you manage without the car?" Although Sandy herself was counting on their faithful family car, she didn't argue. After all, her husband really needed the car more. She smiled. "Of course, I can manage." Jake politely thanked her for breakfast and promised, "It's okay. We'll buy you a car too. Once things at work normalize a bit, you can choose the model." Running out of the house, the man kissed his wife on the cheek, winked, and said, "Don't worry. I remember our wedding anniversary. I'll try to be back by Friday evening." Taking advantage of her husband's absence, Sandy moved in with her mother for a while. She didn't want to waste time on the road. During these few days, she managed to do a thorough cleaning, and the apartment felt especially fresh, like spring. Only the day before the holiday did Alex have to return home to bring an urgently needed diploma to the office. However, this was even convenient, because she also needed to tidy up at home and prepare some of Jake's favorite salads. In the morning, the woman, taking the festive treats she had set aside in separate containers, rushed back to her mother's. She habitually gave her a massage, helped her walk around the room, and, even after waiting for the elevator repair to finish, finally took her mother outside. She wanted her to enjoy the good weather and the feeling that life was returning to what it was before the injury. After a short walk, Martha Jane and Alex had lunch. The daughter began to apologize. "Mom, please forgive me. I'm leaving earlier today. I want to prepare a surprise for Jake. Your keys are with you. Your phone is charged if you get tired of watching TV. If anything happens, call." "Okay, run along, Sandy dear. Happy holiday to you and Jake. Imagine, 10 years together already." Kissing her mother, Sandy ran along the route she had planned beforehand. Spring, which had long established itself and was rapidly approaching summer, offered a gentle warmth. The sweet and tart scent of blooming lilac set the most romantic mood. Despite the folk belief that marrying in May brings trouble, she hadn't suffered in her second marriage. On the contrary, Jake was a quiet harbor for the woman. There were no stormy passions between them, but there was mutual affection and respect. Sandy appreciated her husband for not prying into her soul, not tormenting her with jealousy and suspicion, not demanding that she give birth to an heir or heiress for him. Only when he declared the seriousness of his intentions did Alex frankly and honestly warn him that children were absolutely not in her plans. This statement did not frighten the man. A few years after the wedding, Jake asked if she had changed her mind about having a child, but upon hearing a categorical no, he didn't inquire about the reasons and never brought up the topic again. The man was a good partner, and of course, she loved him in her own way, with all the strength her wounded heart was capable of. Following the list she had made the day before, Alex bought drinks. She bought squid, which Jake adored, and various small things: a crispy baguette, fresh green salad, fruits. Gradually, 2 large shopping bags, which Sandy had thoughtfully brought with her, filled up. Hanging them on both shoulders, she stopped by the confectionery where she had ordered the cake. Now she could go home. Approaching the entrance, Sandy looked hopefully at their family parking spot and breathed a sigh of relief. The car wasn't there. This meant she would have time to set the table, hang balloons, and get dressed before her husband returned. Mentally praising herself for the convenient bags that left one hand free, the woman, hastily opening the door, finally found herself in their family nest. Setting the cake box on the bench, Alex suddenly froze in surprise. An unfamiliar sound, coming from the kitchen, brazenly intruded into the usual hum of the apartment building. Strange. There were no unfamiliar shoes on the mat, no foreign items noticeable, but the sound of dishes was clearly audible, as if someone was moving a heavy plate or a large mug. Jake and Sandy didn't keep pets. They always wanted a cute dog, but the misfortune with Mom adjusted that plan. Perhaps it would have been much smarter to go out onto the landing, close the door, and call her husband. But from exhaustion, Sandy didn't act as safety dictated. Automatically slipping off her sneakers and with the bag still on her shoulders, the woman entered the kitchen and almost collapsed in surprise. With one leg tucked under him, a boy who looked about 6 years old was sitting on a chair. The unknown little guest was completely engrossed in eating. On the table in front of him was Jake's huge mug, a bottle of water, and a large, deep plate into which Alex had put a layered salad the night before so it could soak. A spoon sticking out of the edge clearly indicated that the dish had already been unceremoniously sampled. The child was biting into a stick of smoked sausage with appetite. The woman, flooded with memories, felt a pang in her heart. It was too painful to act rationally. For a few seconds, Alex even thought she was hallucinating due to overwork or some other reason. However, the vision was too realistic. The sound, the image, and even the aroma of the sausage. The engrossed boy only tore himself away from his tasty activity after Sandy, her voice a little hoarse from nervous shock, attracted his attention with a question. "Hey, hi, who are you? And what are you doing here?" The boy jumped up from the chair and, without letting go of the sausage, reported, "My name is Timmy Smith. Uncle Jake brought me here and told me to wait for him. He said I could eat whatever I wanted, so I'm eating. The sausage is tasty, but very salty. It didn't even occur to Sandy that the person the boy called Uncle Jake wasn't her husband, Jake. Such an incredible coincidence, like in a traditional New Year's movie where the hero didn't realize he had opened someone else's apartment with his keys, and nothing in the typical setting of a standard apartment bothered him at all, simply couldn't happen. Sandy could confidently vouch that it was hard to find even a remotely similar design to their home. Of course, the situation with the boy appearing in the kitchen must have a logical explanation, the woman thought. She herself had married Jake in the spring, and the surname Smith meant absolutely nothing to her. Her husband was an only child, but as far as Alex knew, he had cousins. However, they weren't invited to their modest wedding, and she didn't know them not only by face, but also by surname. So it was quite possible that Timmy Smith sitting in front of her was the child of one of her husband's cousins. But why did he, without even warning her, suddenly bring this boy to their apartment? Knocked off balance, Sandy couldn't concentrate. Her thoughts were muddled, and she hadn't even managed to come up with any plausible version when Jake called. Coming out of her stupor, Alex finally took the bags off her shoulders and answered the call. The man began speaking quickly, literally not giving his wife a chance to get a word in. "Darling, we just missed each other. I just left Martha Jane's apartment and will be there in literally 20 minutes to explain everything." Meanwhile, set the table. The bewildered woman felt a little better and replied briefly, "Okay." She felt Timmy's gaze on her very clearly but couldn't find the strength to look him in the eye. The woman brought her new flip-flops from the hallway, which she had just bought in anticipation of the approaching summer season, and offered, "Timmy, it's hot indoors in sneakers. Here, take these slippers, put them on. It will be more comfortable and convenient." The child silently obeyed. To lighten the mood and occupy the boy who had been dropped off, but also to avoid having to talk to him much, Alex asked, "Timmy, can you inflate balloons?" The boy nodded. The woman quickly went to the room, brought the child a whole package, opened it, then, obeying some impulse, rinsed the tips through which Timmy was to inflate the balloons, and handed them to him, asking, "Don't inflate them too much. When you get tired, rest, and I'll help you tie them. Agreed?" The child nodded businesslike, and without any embarrassment asked, "Is your name Sandy?" Alex shrugged. "My name can be changed in different ways. Sandy, or Alex, or Sasha." Timmy's eyes widened in surprise. "But that's what boys are called. Are you like a guy?" Sandy chuckled. "No, I'm not a guy. It's just a versatile name, like Jamie or Terry." Silence fell in the kitchen. The boy, lost in thought about something, occupied himself with the balloons. Alex, keeping an eye on her guest out of the corner of her eye, began unpacking the bags, preparing what she had planned, and gradually setting the table. The woman put the cake in the refrigerator and, interrupting herself to tie the balloons Timmy inflated, felt not irritation, but a gnawing pain. She wasn't angry at her husband, but all sorts of thoughts constantly swirled in her head. The woman felt the curious gaze of the little guest on her, but didn't dare to look him in the eye. So they watched each other, but barely spoke. Busy with chores, Sandy didn't even notice Jake entering the kitchen with a huge bouquet of roses in his hands and a bulky bag. The man put his load on the floor and handed his wife the flowers. "Sandy, congratulations to you and me on our holiday. I see you've already met Timmy, made friends. Simply wonderful. Well then, let's celebrate." The boy, visibly cheered up after Jake's arrival, said shyly, "Congratulations." And when everyone sat down at the table after the inevitable fuss, he boasted loudly, "Uncle Jake, I inflated the balloons myself, and Alex helped me tie them. We prepared a good surprise for you." The adult man mumbled something indistinct in response to the little guest's chirping, praising Timmy and his wife, who hadn't even touched her food. There was tension in the apartment, and Jake set about fixing the situation. He quietly turned on music and began enthusiastically praising the dishes his wife had prepared. Then he proposed a toast to Sandy's beauty and charm, took a small box from his pocket, handed it to her, and said, "Congratulations, I hope you like it." The woman, confused by assumptions and thoughts about why her husband had brought the child to the apartment, only now remembered her own gift. Leaving the not-so-cheerful company for a moment, Sandy, clutching the unopened box in her hand, took out the hidden present. Returning to the table, she handed her husband the package and limited herself to a curt phrase, "Happy tin anniversary." Jake, hastily tearing open the wrapping paper, began loudly admiring the tin flask and started showing the gift to Timmy. The woman felt uncomfortable and again sank into her thoughts. She had imagined their wedding anniversary celebration completely differently. She had wanted to prepare a surprise, but her husband had managed not just to surprise her, but to completely throw her off balance in the most literal sense. "Surprises again!" Sandy coughed violently, choking on mineral water, when she heard the question addressed to her. "Sandy, Timmy dear will stay with us for a couple of weeks, okay?" Sandy was silent, not knowing what to say. Jake tried to justify himself. "I stopped by Martha Jane's to pick you up. On the way home, I wanted to explain everything to you, but I didn't have time, and this is the surprise that resulted. Forgive me for not thinking to warn you, but I was sure I'd find you at Mom's and warn you on the way that we'd have a guest with us." Jake's monologue ended in prolonged silence. Sandy moved food around on her plate with a fork, not looking up at her husband. He, flustered, also didn't know what else to say in his defense. With childish spontaneity, Timmy broke the silence, asking loudly, "Aunt Sandy, thank you. I've already eaten. Can I try the cake now?" The boy showed his empty plate. With a stone face, Sandy got up from the chair and went to the refrigerator. She wanted to scream, stomp her feet, sob, and smash the dishes, as stained as her faith in her husband's honesty. She knew it wouldn't make things easier. The most likely explanation for Jake bringing Timmy to the apartment seemed to her to be the version about her husband's infidelity. With her whole being, Alex now hated the man she had loved for 10 years as much as she was capable of. Jake, who knew his wife well, guessed from her abrupt movements that in a little while, she would directly express everything that was on her mind. He decided to lead the little guest away from the table to the relaxation area, where he could be distracted from the serious conversation between the adults that was about to happen. "Timmy, let's go. I'll turn on the game console for you. The games are mostly complicated, but we can find something you like online, or I'll put on cartoons for you if you want." "And will I be able to eat the cake?" the boy asked interestedly. "Of course, you can have anything there." The boy's eyes sparkled. He trustingly followed the apartment's owner to the cozy, soft corner. Sandy, who had heard her husband and guest talking, cut a large piece of cake, carefully placed it on a plate, turned on the electric kettle, and watched intently as it boiled. The click of it turning off brought her out of her reverie. Brewing tea, the woman placed a cup with the tasty drink, a sugar bowl with a spoon, and the plate with cake on a tray. Then she carried it to the table near the apartment's gaming area. Jake was showing Timmy his collection of computer games, but the boy, who was clearly well-behaved, tore himself away from the engrossing activity and thanked her. "Thank you very much." The woman nodded and, turning sharply, left. When Jake entered the kitchen, he found a strange scene. Sandy was sitting on the floor, holding dirty children's sneakers, and tears were rolling down her cheeks. The man tried to joke. "Hey, Sandy, what's wrong?" "Big deal. A child walked into the kitchen in dirty shoes. We'll turn on the robot vacuum. Let it work. It's no big fuss." Is it really worth getting upset over a little bit of dust? Especially since it's a holiday today. Sandy looked at her husband in such a way that he felt uneasy, and quietly said, "Jake, I think I've told you repeatedly that I don't want to be in the same space with children for long periods. It's beyond my strength. Perhaps there were significant circumstances behind your action, or as you put it, surprise, and you can be understood. Only, forgive me. I have absolutely no desire to deal with explanations today. I'm going to Mom's now, and just a little. Jake couldn't understand the reason for his wife's categorical decision, but saw perfectly well that Alex was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Therefore, he suggested, Sandy, I'm truly very sorry I didn't warn you, but I can explain everything. I think when you listen to me, you'll understand that I simply couldn't have acted differently. I'll wait until you're ready to talk. The woman unexpectedly gently lowered the children's sneakers to the floor, wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, and walked towards the door as if she hadn't heard her husband. Jake took his wife's hand and asked, Sandy, wait a minute. I'll call a taxi to Martha Jane's house so I don't have to worry about you. Alex nodded and was soon in the car, fidgeting with the innocent strap of her handbag. The road was clear, and the journey to her mother's house took much less time than during peak hours. As soon as the woman opened the door, she heard, Linda, come in, dear. I'm not feeling very well. Sandy closed the door behind her and, taking off her shoes, went into her mother's bedroom. Martha Jane was startled to see her daughter. Sandy, dear, why are you back? Didn't Jake come home? By my calculations, your wedding anniversary celebration should be in full swing. But for some reason, you're here. Daughter, what happened? Sandy went to her mother's bed, sat directly on the floor, and resting her head against Martha Jane's hand, told her everything that had happened since she returned home and saw Timmy there. Finishing her story, Alex voiced her assumption. Mom, I'm almost certain that Timmy is Jake's illegitimate son. The boy looks about 6 years old, which means my husband was cheating on me and even had the nerve to present me with proof of his infidelity right on our wedding anniversary. Martha Jane tried to calm her daughter. I'm sure Jake can explain everything. I feel that he loves you. Trust my experience. He would hardly risk his relationship with you and cheat. However, Alex cried nonstop. The woman stroked her daughter, so grown up yet defenseless and sobbing, but said no more words, because they were all powerless. Finally, when the flow of tears dried up, Sandy silently got up from the floor and went to wash her face, swollen from crying. The woman felt completely drained. Returning to her mother's room, Alex confessed, I'm very tired today. Do you mind if I lie down? Martha Jane didn't object or suggest, for example, talking more or having dinner. She understood that her unhappy daughter needed to rest. Of course, Sandy dear, but let's both take something calming, valerian drops or something. It will be good for both of us. Alex complied with her mother's request and went to sleep. The nervous tension was so strong that the woman passed out and woke up when the clock showed 10 in the morning. Jumping up from the sofa, Alex rushed to the kitchen. There she found her mother stirring pancake batter. Good morning, daughter. You're just in time. We'll have breakfast now. Working together, the women made pancakes and, as if by agreement, didn't say a word about yesterday's situation. While Alex was washing the dishes, Martha Jane asked, Daughter, please go to the theater with Linda. She has 2 tickets to a very good play, excellent seats in the stalls. Her niece gave them to her for her birthday. They were supposed to go together, and unfortunately, the niece got sick, and the other relatives can't accompany Linda. Some are called by their dashas, some are flying on business trips. Anyway, the ticket is going to waste. It's a shame. Alex shook her head. Mom, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm absolutely not in the mood. However, if Martha Jane had something in mind, she knew how to insist. That's why you should go, because you're not in the mood. Art is excellent at changing thoughts in your head and changing emotions. Please, daughter, not for the sake of the wasted ticket, but for my sake. Although Sandy had to obey her mother's wish, she categorically refused the suggestion to stop by the hairdresser beforehand for a new haircut. After waiting for Linda to take Alex away, Martha Jane called her son-in-law and said in an almost commanding tone, "Jake, Alex will be gone for about 3 hours. Come over, we need to talk." The man didn't resist but warned, "Martha Jane, I will definitely come, but I have no one to leave Timmy with. I could probably find a hired nanny, but I wouldn't trust the boy to just anyone, so I can only come with him. Do you mind?" The woman sighed. "I don't mind." "Excellent. Then I'll be at your place with Timmy in half an hour." 30 minutes later, Martha Jane, carefully walking to the door leaning on her sturdy walker, let Jake and Timmy into the apartment. The man introduced the child, and the boy politely greeted her. The hostess tried not to betray her incredible nervousness and hospitably invited Timmy to the kitchen. "Come in. I have a TV there and cakes waiting for you. Would you like cocoa or tea?" The child announced that coffee was the tastiest drink for him, but children shouldn't drink it often, and he would have tea because he was too grown up for cocoa. Taken aback, Martha Jane almost laughed but controlled her emotions in time, and, addressing Jake, asked, "May I offer Timmy a chicory drink then? It's almost like coffee." The boy brightened. "I want to try this chicory. Uncle Jake, can I?" Jake agreed, and when the hostess skillfully prepared the treat for Timmy, the man handed the boy his smartphone and explained, "I need to talk to Martha Jane. Please stay here, eat your treat, play on the phone, maybe even watch some videos online. Okay?" "Of course, Uncle Jake. I can manage perfectly fine on my own, don't worry." Watching this scene, Martha Jane could barely hold back tears. Hiding her emotions, she slowly began to walk towards the room she old-fashionedly called the living room. Jake followed her, eager to know what Martha Jane wanted to talk to him about. The woman settled into an armchair, and the man sat on the sofa diagonally opposite, so it would be comfortable to talk. The hostess looked intently at her son-in-law, but he didn't wait long and asked without preamble, "Martha Jane, explain to me why Sandy reacted so strangely to Timmy's appearance in our apartment." "I admit, there's some fault on my part for not warning her. But we're adults. Instead of talking calmly, she practically just ran away to you. Is that normal?" The woman didn't interrupt her son-in-law's indignant speech, but didn't rush to answer his question, instead asking a counter-question. "Before we start this difficult conversation, to try and help my daughter save her family, I need to be sure there's a point to it. Just tell me honestly, is Timmy your illegitimate son?" The man's indignation was boundless. "No, of course not. It never even crossed my mind to cheat on Sandy. I love and respect her very much. My attitude towards children is starting to scare me. Timmy ended up in our apartment because of a desperate situation. Sandy didn't even try to get along with him, although, as you probably noticed, he's a perfectly well-behaved and intelligent, very charming boy." Jake's answer calmed the agitated woman, and, taking a deep breath as if preparing to parachute, she decided to tell the truth. "Well, as they say, every secret comes to light. As her husband, you have the right to know why my daughter avoids contact with children. I think I have the right to tell you her story, which at first seemed like a happy fairy tale, and then turned into a terrible nightmare that destroyed her usual life." Sandy. Dear grew up a wonderful and intelligent girl, a real joy for me and her father. We easily arranged for her to study at one of the best gymnasiums in our city. Our family's prosperity and the positions her father and I held allowed Sandy to fit in with others from what they call golden youth. However, the gymnasium had a very strong teaching staff, and grades weren't for sale, as you might have thought. Children were skillfully engaged in learning, and our Sandy dear was one of the best students in her class. She was even made a sort of mentor for her deskmate, Zachary. The boy was from a very good family, quite influential in our city. No joke, his father was the regional prosecutor, and his mother held a significant position in the same department. In short, they lived better than our family, but they didn't hinder the friendship between their son and Sandy. They welcomed her quite sincerely, and communicated with her father and me not condescendingly, but quite kindly. When Sandy Deer was in the 10th grade, her father died suddenly. A blood clot broke off, as the autopsy showed. It was Zachary's family who supported me and Sandy after that loss. I'm still grateful to them for that, because I was in such a state that I almost joined my husband myself. So, of course, I didn't object at all when Sandy decided to marry Zachary. So what if she was just over 18 at that moment? It was obvious that you couldn't stand in the way of true feelings. Zachary's parents also didn't object, and were even happy that my daughter became part of their family. A year after the wedding, Sandy Deer and Zachary had twins, 2 boys, Leo and Johnny. They grew up healthy, cheerful, and strong, and brought joy to all of us. Sandy Deer couldn't get enough of her children. You know, Jake, she used to tell me that she would walk, pushing the stroller in front of her, and her heart would feel like it was going to jump out of her chest from happiness. Of course, I helped whenever I could. Her mother-in-law repeatedly offered Sandy a reliable nanny, but my daughter refused every time, and she mostly managed on her own. God knows what it cost her, but she didn't drop out of university and even managed without taking a leave of absence. And her father-in-law got her a prestigious, well-paid job, a position with strictly regulated working hours, a social package, and other perks. He certainly had that opportunity, and there was no shame in providing patronage for his daughter-in-law. Sandy Deer was very smart. Leo and Johnny were 6 years old when my daughter got pregnant again. Zachary welcomed the news joyfully, and why would he be upset? The family relationships were wonderful. As far as I know, there wasn't a single quarrel between them, as if 2 halves were lucky enough to unite into one whole. I know many people were envious, and some women tried to start a romance with Zachary, but he didn't need anyone but my Sandy Deer. Everything was so perfect that it never even occurred to us that everything would collapse in an instant due to a terrible tragedy. Sandy Deer had to go to the doctor, and Zachary volunteered to pick up the boys from kindergarten himself. By a ridiculous coincidence, his car broke down that day, and he decided not to call a taxi but to walk the children home through the park. The weather was wonderful, and although the amusement rides weren't working yet, there was a pizzeria at the park exit that the boys unanimously wanted to go into. On the way, Zachary met a friend, and while he was talking to him, the children, getting playful, ran out onto the lake. But the March ice was treacherously thin. My grandsons, as witnesses later recounted, didn't even have time to cry out. They went under the water instantly. Zachary and his friend rushed to the water, but the boys could only be retrieved by the divers who arrived at the scene of the tragedy. Zachary later tried to justify himself, repeating like a broken record that he was distracted for only a few seconds. But what was the point? Our boys drowned. There was no way to fix that. The son-in-law was the first to tell me this bitter news, because he was afraid for Sandy, and not without reason. I went to the private clinic where I knew Sandy Deer was at the time. My heart told me it was better if doctors were nearby when the terrible grief struck my daughter. Seeing me in the corridor, Alex probably understood everything from my face. After hearing the news, she had a hysterical fit. Even a large dose of medication couldn't calm Sandy Deer. She didn't make it home that evening. She ended up in the hospital with a nervous breakdown. From the stress over her deceased sons, my daughter couldn't save the baby developing under her heart. The doctors didn't even consider him a child yet, but she had already lost him. At Leo and Johnny's funeral, Alex stood like a stone statue, without tears, without emotion, pale as death. The emptiness in her eyes was especially terrifying. Zachary suffered no less. His hair turned gray at 25. He tried to take Sandy Deer's hand to support her, but she recoiled from him as if he were a leper. She never crossed the threshold of the apartment where she had lived with her husband and sons again. Zachary tried to talk to her countless times, but it never worked. Sandy dear simply erased her husband from her life. Zachary's mother came to us, realizing that my daughter didn't want to see or hear her husband. She knelt, begging her to forgive her son, saying he wasn't himself anymore, sharing sad thoughts that he was on the verge and might leave this world. But Sandy didn't react at all. She could never forgive her husband for the death of their sons. Zachary couldn't forgive himself either. He truly turned from a thriving man into a pale imitation of his former self. Alex predictably quit her job, supposedly voluntarily, but everyone understood that she simply couldn't bear to be under public scrutiny. Moreover, an unusual and unexpected problem arose. Her daughter would approach hysteria the moment she went outside and saw a child. She changed her route, but it's impossible to completely exclude the possibility of encountering children. One day, Sandy dear and I were in the elevator, and a neighbor with a little girl joined us. Everything seemed normal, but I got nervous. After our fellow passengers left the cabin, I looked at my daughter and saw blood running down her chin. She had bitten her lips so hard, trying to suppress a hysterical fit. After that incident, my daughter stayed home almost non-stop for nearly a month. I even called a special doctor, the best of the best, to the house. There were changes, but they were slow and not positive at all. After a period of apathy, my daughter became aggressive. It was as if she was possessed, and the medication prescribed by the doctor couldn't cope with it for long. Alex would take the pills, fall into a state of indifference to everything for a few hours, and then start agonizingly pondering something, pacing back and forth across the room. Once I saw her searching online for poisons, and I was seriously frightened. I realized my daughter had decided to deal with the unwitting culprit of her children's death. I tried to stay by her side constantly, watching over my daughter so she wouldn't do anything irreparable. One day, Sandy dear managed to leave the house in the morning while I was asleep. Friends later told me that she ambushed Zachary near his work and attacked him with her fists, screaming, "Why are you alive when our sons aren't?" I don't know, maybe my friends exaggerated, but supposedly 4 strong men could barely pull her away from a bewildered Zachary. He didn't even resist. When I came to get her, my daughter was sitting in a back room, where the smell of hated Corvalol and some other medications hung in the air, and she was barely reacting to anything. They told me an ambulance had come and sedated Alex. Among friends and neighbors, of course, all the talk was about the accident with my grandsons and how Sandy was going crazy with grief. One day, Zachary's father called me and strongly asked me and my daughter to leave the city. You don't refuse people like him. Besides, I myself was thinking about how to hide my daughter from memories, from sympathetic and curious glances. I quit my job, sold the apartment. Again, thanks to my son-in-law's parents, I managed to do it quickly and at a quite reasonable price, given the urgency. Sandy dear and Zachary were divorced in absentia, again thanks to his relatives. My daughter didn't even have to go anywhere. As a result, we moved to this city, away from everything that was. Well, and then you know the rest, Jake. You met her, and my daughter started coming back to life. Don't think Sandy dear is a child hater. It's just that it still hurts her. She also refuses the possibility of becoming a mother again because of the fear of repeating the nightmare she had to go through. Martha Jane fell silent. Telling her daughter's terrible story had exhausted the woman emotionally. Jake noticed how pale her face had become and hurried to the kitchen to get her some water. Timmy was engrossed in playing on the phone, and the man, stroking his head, filled a glass and returned to the living room to Martha Jane. "Excuse me for making you remember everything." The woman, carefully drinking the water, said bitterly, "Ah, Jake, if only it were possible to forget it at all. Perhaps you should have known about Sandy dear's past sooner. I couldn't bring myself to tell it all out loud. My daughter, as I understand it, still can't talk about it either." The man looked at the woman puzzled and confessed, Honestly, I couldn't even imagine that such a tragedy could be hidden behind Sandy's unwillingness to become a mother. I thought maybe she didn't want to spoil her figure. It's hard to even imagine what feelings she had when she saw Timmy in our kitchen. What a surprise I managed to create, right on our wedding anniversary. How can I ask Sandy for forgiveness now so she understands me? I really had nowhere else to take Timmy, and for several reasons, the boy needed to be sheltered for a week or two in a comfortable and safe place where his parents' enemies wouldn't even think of looking. It all happened practically by chance. I went to the branch and ran into an old friend on the street whom I hadn't seen since I was discharged from the army. Vic is more than a friend to me. It's only thanks to him that I survived in the army. But that's a long story. And in civilian life, our paths diverged to our hometowns. And, as happens, we lost touch. I tried to find him on social media somehow. Maybe I should have searched more persistently. Then I would have found him. But I got caught up building my career. In short, we hadn't seen each other for about 15 years. And here I meet Victor in a city that's foreign to both of us. He had changed, of course, over the years, but I recognized him immediately. He almost walked past me without noticing, but I stopped him. It turned out that Vic had come to solve problems for his sister and her husband. They had gotten involved in a lawsuit with some not-so-adequate people who were used to conducting all their affairs in a criminal manner. Vic was most worried about Timmy, his nephew. He explained to his sister that just in case, as a precaution, the child needed to be hidden, because these bandits could easily influence the resolution of the issue in their favor through him. But they couldn't come up with any reliable place. And then I appeared out of nowhere. Vic's idea of taking Timmy out of the city seemed like an ideal option. Indeed, there were practically no threads that could lead the bandits to the child's trail. It's also good that the boy has a strong character, growing up to be a real man. His parents and Vic told him he needed to stay with me for a little while, and he calmly accepted the news. I picked him up like in a detective story, making sure not to get caught on the city's surveillance cameras. We agreed for Vic to contact me in a week, and he was supposed to call me himself when the issue was resolved. Timmy, of course, is simply an ideal boy. He settled into the unfamiliar place easily, and even put himself to bed after brushing his teeth. All that's left is to wait for Vic's call. It's very easy for me to communicate with Timmy, but on Monday I have to go to work, and I can hardly take him with me. Now I really don't know what to do. Jake fell silent, and then, unexpectedly for him and Martha Jane, Sandy's voice rang out. "Nothing special. You'll go to work as usual, and I'll stay with Timmy. Just leave me the car so I don't have to drag the boy to Mom's and back on public transport." It turned out that contrary to Martha Jane's calculations, her daughter had already returned from the theater and, it seemed, had heard some part of her husband's story. To her mother's preemptive question, Alex explained, "I couldn't watch the play at the theater. I went to the restroom, washed my face, and realized I couldn't go back and stare at the stage without even trying to understand the plot. I typed a message to Linda apologizing and came here. It turned out I came back just in time. Perhaps I needed to hear Timmy's story from an outsider's perspective, because, forgive me, Jake, I suspected you of cheating. I would hardly have believed it if you had told me all this yesterday. Today, I can look at this situation more reasonably. Mom, you don't mind if I visit you with Timmy, do you?" The woman, trying not to scare away the changes in her daughter's attitude towards children, spoke very cautiously. "Of course. Come." Martha Jane wanted to add something else, but her eyes stung betrayingly, and she decided to change the subject. "Sandy, dear Jake, aren't you hungry? I could eat something right now. Let's go to the kitchen. Besides, we need to see how Timmy is doing, whether he's bored. I completely forgot about the rules of hospitality." The boy, seeing Sandy, didn't forget to greet her. The woman's voice trembled slightly as she returned his greeting. Jake, who now understood the reason for his wife's strange behavior, was amazed by her resilience. Having gone through such a life trial, she had managed to endure and never tried to appeal to his pity or elicit sympathy with stories of what she had faced. Sandy gently but persistently declined Martha Jane's attempts to feed everyone who had gathered in her kitchen that evening. "Thank you, Mom, for everything. But we should probably go home. I'll stop by tomorrow closer to lunchtime." Jake, understanding that he had been forgiven by his wife, was very happy and heartily said goodbye to Martha Jane, promising, "We'll all visit you together tomorrow. If you're feeling up to it and the weather is warm, we can go out somewhere. How does that sound to you?" "Wonderful, Jake. Let's not plan too far ahead." After saying goodbye to the hostess, Alex, Jake, and Timmy set off for the other side of the city. The man got behind the wheel and saw in the mirror how carefully his wife buckled the boy into his seatbelt. It was obvious that for Sandy, this was an absolutely natural gesture, once brought to automation. She was clearly a tender, caring mother, loved her children very much, and after the misfortune that befell her, suffered as you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. Carefully parking the car near the entrance, the man carried the sleeping Timmy up to the apartment in his arms. Sandy straightened the crumpled sheet on the sofa, gently took off the boy's shoes, and covered the child with a blanket. Watching his wife, Jake felt incredible tenderness towards her. Unexpectedly, his beloved woman revealed an unfamiliar side of her personality. He realized he had made the absolutely right choice. Later, they closed the kitchen door and drank tea with the leftover cake. As if there had been no wall of misunderstanding between them yesterday, they planned their Sunday schedule with jokes and kisses. The man finally decided to bring up the unpleasant topic and confessed, "Sandy, I'm a real idiot. I almost ruined everything with my actions, and I want to say a huge thank you for your understanding." His wife smiled. "Well, honestly, I also overreacted. So I suggest we forget about it. It's in the past." The day off passed cheerfully, and even better than the couple had expected. They managed to get Martha Jane out for a walk, who was less happy about the sunny May day than about her daughter's happy eyes. Alex happily answered Timmy's questions and also constantly watched to make sure he wasn't in danger. However, neither her mother nor her husband dared to criticize her or accuse her of being overprotective. Timmy, it seemed, didn't even pay attention to the fact that he was being surrounded with maximum care. By agreement with Sandy, he called her by her first name, not using the word aunt, and seemed quite pleased with his unexpected trip. After the outing, they dropped Martha Jane off at home, and the trio lingered because there was simply no chance of leaving the woman unfed. However, no one objected. Late in the evening, as Alex was putting Timmy to bed, the boy quietly asked her, "Do you think my parents are okay? Will I see them soon?" Trying to make her voice sound firm and convincing, Sandy replied, "Of course they're okay. They'll finish all their business very soon, and you'll see them." The calmed boy fell asleep. Alex, afraid of waking the child, beckoned her husband to the kitchen and began asking him about the situation Timmy's parents were involved in. "Sandy, honestly, I don't even know all the details. Vic gave me a very brief overview, but I understood that some real thugs were harassing his sister and her husband." The woman began asking clarifying questions that surprised her husband. "Are these bandits from the city you went to? Or are they outsiders? Did he mention any nicknames?" Jake told her everything he knew, but Sandy felt the information wasn't enough. She suddenly asked, "Can you contact Victor urgently? I need to get some clarifications from him to try and help Timmy's parents. Of course he's doing well here and is quite comfortable, I hope, but a mother and son shouldn't be separated for long." From Sandy's voice, it was impossible to guess how deeply she had taken Timmy and his parents' situation to heart. But now, knowing his wife's past, Jake understood how difficult it was for her. "Victor actually gave me a password to a chat for just such a case, where all messages automatically disappear. I think I can try to contact him." The man opened the necessary website, entered the data he had memorized at his army friend's request, and a few minutes later exclaimed happily, "It worked! Vic greeted me." Alex thoughtfully advised, "Jake, ask him a question that you can be sure, based on the answer, confirms it's your friend you're talking to. And if there's even the slightest doubt, immediately close the site and take the SIM card out of your phone." Alarmed by his wife's suspicions, Jake quickly typed a few phrases and waited impatiently for a response. Reading the received message, the man breathed a sigh of relief. "Everything's fine. It's definitely Vic," he answered with our code phrase. Sandy nodded and asked, "Excellent. Write to Victor that your wife will be chatting with him now, and give me the phone. I'll find out everything I need from your friend myself." Nothing surprises me anymore. Jake handed his wife the smartphone. She chatted with the stranger for quite a long time. Then she grabbed a pen, quickly wrote down a number on a bread package, tore off the edge of the paper with the digits, squeezed it in her hand, and handed the phone back to her husband. "That's it. I'm going to the bathroom. I need to make a call. Write to Vic to log into this messenger in an hour. Then I hope I'll be able to tell him something concrete." Sandy left the kitchen and went to the bathroom, which had the best soundproofing in the apartment. Taking a few deep breaths, the woman dialed the number of her former father-in-law, which she had memorized. The phone was unavailable. Alex gathered all her willpower and dialed her former husband's number. Soon, his voice was heard in the receiver. "I'm listening. Don't be silent." Sandy's voice was hoarse with emotion, and she replied, "Zachary, hello. It's Alex. I need your help. More precisely, your father can probably resolve the situation, but I can't reach him. The robot says the phone is out of the service area." The man's demanding tone noticeably softened. "Alex, I'm glad to hear from you, even on such an occasion. My father is abroad now, but if you tell me what the problem is, I will certainly try to provide all possible assistance. I work in the regional prosecutor's office now, so all my connections are at your service." "Thank you," the woman replied, told him everything she had learned, and dictated the number she had written down. "Okay, Alex, I understand everything. It's not the simplest matter, but it's solvable. I think, ultimately, there's a more influential force for every thug. I'll try to help. Warn this acquaintance that I will call him tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, depending on how things turn out, from my phone, and he can safely accept the call." "Thank you, Zachary." Without waiting for her former husband's reply, Sandy ended the conversation, which had been very difficult for her, and washed her face with ice-cold water. She hoped this would bring her at least some semblance of emotional balance. Even during the conversation with Zachary, she had wanted to apologize to him but couldn't. The bitter resentment for the man's carelessness, which had caused her to lose her children, still burned in the woman's heart. At the same time, Alex understood perfectly well that without the intervention of her former husband, who had extensive connections in the region, Timmy's family was practically doomed. She wanted to protect the boy and try to save his parents. The woman sat in the bathroom for some time, regulating her heartbeat with breathing exercises. Seeing that almost an hour had passed, she returned to the kitchen to Jake and told him what Zachary had said. The man wrote the information received from his wife to his friend and hugged Alex tightly. He saw how his beloved woman had become drawn in the last hour and didn't know how to help her. He wanted to protect her from all misfortunes, but instead, Alex had to, as Jake easily guessed, turn to the person who had almost completely destroyed her life. The conversation had agitated the woman. She freed herself from Jake's embrace and automatically began clearing the table, not noticing that she was throwing perfectly untouched food into the trash can. Finally, the man took her hand and suggested, "Stop fussing. It's been a difficult day, and we need to rest." Even listening to her sleeping husband's peaceful breathing, Alex couldn't calm down. Images of her little ones appeared before her eyes, as if in reality. Here are Leo and Johnny smiling at her with toothless smiles, then going to kindergarten for the first time and clinging to the window, waving to her with their little hands, giving her cards for Mother's Day. Here, clearly having conspired instead of falling asleep, they applaud loudly and together when she starts singing them a lullaby. How many pleasant moments were there, so carefully stored somewhere far away in her memory, and how brutally everything was erased by an accident. How many times had she warned her sons not to take risks? They still didn't listen. However, what was the point of being angry now? Leo and Johnny are gone, and their father is now the only hope that Timmy will be able to hug his mother very soon. Let at least this woman, completely unknown to Alex, be helped by Zachary. Timmy stirred and began mumbling something, and Sandy, slipping out from under her husband's arm, hurried to the boy. She carefully adjusted the blanket, which he had almost thrown onto the floor, felt his forehead, afraid that the child had a fever. She breathed a sigh of relief, feeling that, based on her experience, everything was fine. Timmy opened his eyes, and Alex, sitting on the edge of the sofa, began quietly humming a lullaby. The boy had long fallen asleep, but the woman remained sitting next to him, and she wanted so much for the child to return to his parents as soon as possible, and at the same time, she knew she would desperately miss being with him. When the sky, visible through the gap in the curtains, lightened, Sandy quietly went to the kitchen to make herself coffee and work on documents. There was no point in going back to sleep. In those dawn hours, perhaps somewhere far away, issues directly concerning Timmy's fate were being decided, but Alex was powerless to influence anything. She had done all she could, overcoming her deadly resentment, and now all that remained was to wait for the result. Carefully studying the papers, the woman made notes in the margins, wrote her suggestions on a separate sheet, and, neatly putting everything back into the zippered folder, began preparing breakfast, trying not to make noise. She had already decided to ask her boss for time off so as not to unnecessarily tire the boy with travel to unfamiliar places. Waiting for a convenient time to send messages, Alex typed to her boss that she would send the prepared documents through her husband. She began thinking about how to please the little guest, who, of course, was worried about the forced separation from his parents, although he tried to be brave. When a showered but still yawning Jake looked into the kitchen, Alex had almost everything ready. She invited her husband to the table and asked, "Jake, stop by Edward Arthur's on your way and give him the folder with the documents from me. I've already warned him that I won't be able to come into work for a few days. If anything needs to be reviewed, he can send it to my email or forward it through you. In an extreme case, of course, I'll come, but I wouldn't want to stress Timmy. I wanted to take him to Mom's and then go to a children's entertainment center. Why should he constantly play computer games? Let him have fun, play around, so he doesn't think about sad things, because he seemed to have nightmares last night." Jake agreed with his wife's plan and, quickly finishing his breakfast, thanked her and began getting ready for work. Timmy woke up much later, but Alex didn't think of waking him. She wanted the boy to feel no discomfort. The woman fed the child, and then suggested, "Let's stop by my mom's for a little while, and then we'll go somewhere to have fun." A message arrived on Sandy's phone, and she smiled, seeing the notification of money deposited. Jake had made sure his wife wouldn't have financial problems. The woman smiled and asked the boy, "Would you like to go to an amusement park with me? It's not very far from the city, and there are lots of options for fun there. A fun house, rope courses, and I think even a climbing wall. Do you like such active entertainment, or maybe you prefer movies? That's also no problem. I haven't seen a movie on the big screen in ages." Timmy admitted shyly, "Honestly, I'd rather go to the amusement park." "Well, then that's where we'll go." Martha Jane was very happy when her daughter came to her with the boy. This meant Sandy had believed her husband and hadn't acted rashly, demanding that the child be placed somewhere else. From her traumatic memories, she saw that Sandy seemed to have thawed even after the brief interaction with Timmy, and she barely managed to get them to leave as early as possible. "Daughter, I feel absolutely wonderful today. Go, have fun. If anything, of course, I'll call, but really, don't worry. I feel like I even have more strength today after yesterday's walk." Turning to the boy, Martha Jane asked, "Timmy dear, please, have a good rest for yourself and for me." The boy nodded completely seriously and promised, "I'll ask Alex to take pictures and send them to you. You have a smartphone, right?" The woman smiled and praised, "Well done, that's a great idea." "Exactly. It will be like I'm having fun with you." "Alex, check if your phone is charged." Sandy reassured her mother, saying she could charge her phone in the car at any moment. Soon the guests left Martha Jane, and she, left alone, began to dream that her daughter would finally decide to become a mother again. It was obvious to the woman that Sandy knew how to get along perfectly with children, but she had suffered for so many years, deliberately avoiding interacting with them. "May everything turn out well for my long-suffering girl," Martha Jane prayed aloud, hoping her request would be heard somewhere above. Sandy, driving the car especially carefully, took Timmy to have fun. She felt the weight of the responsibility she had voluntarily taken on pressing down on her more and more. The boy asked to go on the rope course first, and the woman agreed, although at the sight of the rope stretched high up, she wanted to grab the child in her arms and not let him go. Sandy watched the playful child without looking away and occasionally took photos, but didn't dare to get distracted by sending particularly expressive pictures to her mother. The woman felt that if she was distracted for even a few seconds, something bad would happen to the boy. The thought came to her of the degree of despair Timmy's mother must have been in to agree to give her son to a practically unknown person. Such an act could only be decided upon due to a real threat to the child's life and health. So she, Alex, had no right to let down the woman who knew the absolute minimum information: name, surname, age, and that the unfortunate woman and her husband were involved in a situation they couldn't get out of on their own. However, Alex, no matter how you looked at it, was in an even better position. Victoria, Timmy's mother, knew even less about the people who had sheltered her son. The Monday filled with entertainment flew by unnoticed. The boy, tired from numerous outdoor activities, fell asleep after a hearty dinner and rested completely calmly until morning, without crying out or waking up. Jake and Sandy talked quietly in the kitchen. The woman enthusiastically talked about how bravely Timmy conquered the rides and showed photos. "Tomorrow, after visiting Mom, I want to take our guests to our museums, and then go to the cinema. Or vice versa, whatever Timmy wants. If you can, join us. It will be fun. He's so cool and sometimes says such profound things. Today he told me that adults deliberately try to look serious so they are feared and no one bothers them. Can you imagine?" The man agreed that there was something reasonable in that conclusion and suggested, "Sandy, let's go to bed too, like Timmy, because tomorrow, as I understand it, will be no less busy." Neither Tuesday nor Wednesday brought news from Zachary or the boy's relatives. Although the child visited various entertainment and educational places, his mood worsened with each passing day. He thought more and more often and became sad. Jake and Alex understood that the boy missed his family more and more, but couldn't influence the situation in any way. Only on Thursday, when Alex and Timmy were visiting Martha Jane, did the long-awaited call come. Zachary informed his ex-wife that the main difficulties were already behind them. He warned, "There are still some minor issues to resolve, but those are trifles. The main thing is that the boy is no longer in danger. His parents have already set off in the direction of the city where you live now. I warned them to call you in advance when they are approaching and clarify the address. In short, I will, of course, see this matter through to the end. You don't need to worry." Sandy thanked her ex-husband with complete sincerity. "Thank you, Zachary, and forgive me for everything." The man's voice rang out as he replied to the woman who had caused him so much pain. "Alex, you have no idea how happy I am to hear from you, even on such an occasion. I wish you happiness, and if anything, don't hesitate to contact me. I'll always be happy to help." Sandy said goodbye to her ex-husband, and Martha Jane, who had overheard her daughter's conversation, couldn't believe her ears. It seemed her Sandy dear had just communicated quite adequately with the person she had once loved deeply and then hated. "Mom, we need to go. Timmy's parents are on their way, and I still need to give him a bath." The child understood that he would soon see his mom and dad. He started jumping around the room, shouting, "Hooray!" Alex could barely calm him down. In her joy over the successful resolution of the situation, Martha Jane gave the boy her photo and a collection of stamps that he had taken a liking to as a keepsake. "Here, Timmy dear, you can look at the album and remember me." The child promised, "Thank you, but I won't forget you, Grandma Martha, even without the stamps." Taking advantage of the moment, Sandy called her husband to tell him the good news, but it turned out he already knew. "Sandy, Vic already told me that thanks to your help, everything was resolved. I'm taking a taxi home now to prepare for our guests." Sandy was a little sad to part with the boy who had awakened memories of the happiest days spent with her sons. She invited him to visit a toy store on the way. "You know, I really want to give you something too. Choose whatever you want." The boy didn't resist, but, perhaps feeling shy, he didn't spend long walking between the shelves of displayed toys. Very soon, he took a robot from the shelf that was far from the most expensive. On the way to the checkout, Sandy put an airplane in the basket that Timmy had once talked about admiringly, and a few more board games. "Oh, so much!" the child exclaimed in surprise. "This is a real holiday today." Sandy agreed. "Yes, Timmy, today is a very big holiday." By the time the doorbell rang, the boy was already freshly bathed, and cutlery adorned the table. Victoria, as soon as she crossed the threshold, rushed to her son, hugging and showering him with kisses. The boy's father handed Sandy flowers, and Victor gave Jake a strong, manly hug. After Timmy took on the role of an adult and introduced his parents to the apartment's hosts, everyone sat down at the table. Victoria volunteered to help Alex and confessed, "If it weren't for your kindness, I don't even know how we would have managed it all. I can't express my gratitude enough. My husband and I have collected some money to compensate for Timmy's expenses and your inconvenience." Sandy turned pale and replied, "Victoria, please put that envelope away immediately. Don't insult me with that gesture. Your boy will be going to school soon. Spend this money on him. And if it's not too much trouble, sometimes send my husband and me his photos. That would be the best gratitude." An embarrassed Victoria burst into tears and hugged Sandy. When Timmy, worried about his mother and Alex's long absence from the table, looked into the kitchen, he saw the women crying, unable to hold back tears, and asked in an adult manner, "What happened? Did you hit yourselves? Did you cut yourselves? Did you burn yourselves?" Alex and Victoria simultaneously wiped away their tears. Mom calmed her son. "Everything's okay, dear. Everything's just perfect." Hugging the boy, she picked him up, lifted him, and spun him around. Alex watched the happy people and felt no envy, but wished that all troubles were left in the past for this family. After the guests left, Sandy leaned trustingly against her husband and confessed to him, "You know, I think I'm ready for motherhood. Timmy proved to me that children are the greatest happiness." The man didn't try to dissuade his wife. Soon, Sandy delighted him and Martha Jane with the news of her pregnancy. Exactly on time and without any complications, the woman gave birth to a daughter. They named the girl Victoria, in honor of Jake's army friend, and as a symbol of victory over the terrible memories of the past.